National Assembly's swift passage of the National Minimum Wage Amendment Bill on Tuesday has continued to elicit several reactions among Nigerians, even as the bill currently awaits assent by President Bola Tinubu. While the act increased the national minimum wage for Nigerian workers from 30,000 naira a month to 70,000 naira. During the passage, the Senate President, Godswill Akpabio, announced that the new wage applies to all workers across both public and private sectors, including maids and other domestic staff.
Every Nigerian employed in any kind of employment, be it private sector, government, or otherwise, would not receive anything below 70,000 a month. And this is the beauty of minimum wage. It is not maximum wage. It only says that if you're a tailor and you employ additional hand, you cannot pay the person below 70,000. If you're a mother and you have a newborn child and you want to bring in a housemaid to look after your child, you cannot pay that housemaid below 70,000.
Well, Akpabio's comments have now triggered another round of debates by Nigerians on the average pay for domestic workers. Well, I'm joined now by journalist and scholar Charles Onunaiju. Also with me is Lynda Ogbonna, who is the CEO of Coral Worker, an online platform for the hire of domestic workers. Thank you, both of you, for joining us on Newsnight. Let me start with the lady. I mean, you're involved with domestic servants or, domestic workers.
Yes.
Yes.
Household workers.
Household workers.
Yes.
That's the way to put it.
Okay.
How practicable really is, what the President of the Senate, Godswill Akpabio, coming up with that, look, it's not maximum wage. It is minimum. And domestic staff and all whatnot, every worker in the public and private sector must get nothing lower than 70,000 naira. How practicable?
Thank you for that question. We appreciate the Senate President calling for that. We understand it stems from his desire to see that every worker in Nigeria is included in this process and that nobody is left behind. Unfortunately, this might not even be practicable for our industry. Now, I say this because I'll give you a simple scenario.
Yeah.
You hire a domestic worker. Let's say you live in Wuse. Good. And due to the level of income, they are unable to live close to you.
Right.
A worker lives in
maybe
Pape, Airport Road, and you want this person to work as a live-out staff, which means this person comes from her house in the morning and closes in the evening. When she leaves her house, she would take a bike from the interior village or somewhere where she lives there. These bikes cost an average of 200 to 300 naira currently to get to the junction where she will board a taxi to get to Wuse. Now, let's say your house is just somewhere close to Wuse Markets there, and she doesn't need to go any further. Now, 200 to 300 plus an average of 500 to 600. If she's going further, say to zone 2 or to zone 3, that's an additional cost. This is just one-way trip. Right. If she's coming back, she's paying the same thing. Okay, so I'm going to take an average of 1,000 naira.
Every day?
For each way, multiplied by both ways, which is 2,000. So if she pays this daily on a salary of 70,000 naira, that means she's spending about 40 to 50,000 naira out of her 70,000 salary on transportation alone. Her feeding is inclusive. Her housing is included. Her rent, her other bills, basic living necessities are included in this 70,000. And of course, we always telling domestic workers, you see so much luxury and don't touch. You understand? Which is the right thing. Nobody's allowed to do that. But you need to give people the ability to have the minimum wage to be able to survive. I did not, how will I call it? I did not say what they said is, yes, I'm not making any assumptions. I'm giving you a practical example of what an average domestic worker spends and goes through.
Mr. Onunaiju, is this really the metrics with which we should be measuring minimum wage? And really, should we be talking about minimum wage or minimum salary? Because that seems to be what we're talking about here in Nigeria, because people are paid on a monthly basis, not on an hourly or, you know, daily or weekly basis.
Yeah, you see, this whole talk about minimum wage or the money that should be paid to working people is, I think it is misunderstood in official quarters as charity, you know, but you see, if you look at the economics, because the truth is, if you have a sustained depressed wages over time, it has consequences for any serious economic recovery. If you have a depressed wage, as we've had in the past, unfortunately, 70,000 naira is a non-starter. It's very unfortunate that the Nigerian Labour Congress, the UTC, whichever, accepted this. Yes. It's absolutely unacceptable, because if you have workers paid well, the multiplier effect for the economy, for its recovery. You see, we've been in this supply-side economics for too long, and it led us nowhere. We need to engage demand-side economy, because you need to demand for supply to be upticked. The question remains, if workers cannot, that's why even the call for foreign investors to come in looks like a joke. A foreign investor does not come to watch our faces. He comes to sell products, to render service for which he is expected to make money. So who pays? It is the working people, the majority that constitute the market. The market is not a few people in government. It is the majority of the working people that constitutes the market. So for a market to be truly viable, you cannot depress wages for such a long time. You must give people purchasing power. When workers are paid very well, they will demand more. The producer will produce more. The artisans who are cost, if you pay workers well, they repay the seat in their houses. You provide job for the artisan who is a mechanic. You provide job for an artisan who is a carpenter. You provide job for across the board. You can eliminate.
What about other factors like, you know, qualification? How much time you've put in terms of training, personal development, and all of those things that factor into
that is what
you get.
Minimum wage should be, of course, minimum wage is, of course, the benchmark. You know, every other thing. But what we are saying is that the minimum wage, as it is absolutely unrealistic. And if it is unrealistic, other layers of payment will equally be unrealistic. Because the most important thing is to create a demand. The economy has been sustainably underperforming. The best way to recover it is to create a demand. And you cannot create a demand without improvement in people's earning. It's fundamental, both in attracting foreign investor. Okay, foreign investor is coming here, is asking, who patronizes me? He talks about the middle class.
So very quickly, let me come back to you. I mean, to what extent really should the law take over the power of negotiation for workers? Because that seems to be what we're seeing now.
Okay, let me put it to you this way. What you're clamoring for is 70,000 for workers. Currently, if you work as a leave-out worker with us, we can't book any worker for 70,000.
What would be the practical figure?
The least that is allowed is a minimum of 100 to 120. When training, skills, and other details, other factors come into play, like you just mentioned. So the least a worker who works as a leave-out staff should be booked for is 100,000. So that no matter what that, but if the person squeezes herself, maybe she joins her colleague or her neighbor to cut the trip into half or something. Yes, she'll be able to save at least 60,000 after spending 40,000 on transportation. If it's a live-in worker, the government has already placed the minimum wage at 70,000. That's a different thing. The person maybe is getting an offset from, say, food, some basic things that is being, you know, written off for her. But if it has to do with a leave-out worker, and I understand, and I know civil servants are also in the same category, we cannot book anybody to any employer currently for anything less than 100,000. Less than.
And
when I mean 100,000, it's not. It depends on the proximity to where you are and where the worker is coming from. There are some places that will go as high as the 150 or
apparently
200.
If you're talking about a place like Abuja, for example, the city was not really planned in a way to accommodate this. Yes. I mean, look at Maitama, Wuse 2 and what have you, Asokoro and all of that. I mean, there's no room for this lower cadre of persons in society. They must come from, far, far away.
We have planned it in a way that they are far away from us, but we need their services, and we want them to come from their house, but we don't want to pay to cover for that convenience that we enjoy.
Mr. Onunaiju, should we begin to expand this conversation into towards, creating or achieving a more productive economy where everyone, is involved in terms of, number one, in the West, for example, people are paid wages on an hourly basis, right? You're able to predict, depending on how much time or how much hours that you put in, how much you get, at the end of the day. Should we be looking at that?
Of course.
Because that will expand also the issue of unemployment. More people will be employed because you have shift, system and what have you.
You see, this issue of production could really be in the front burner. But the truth of the matter is government policies. Of course, the Manufacturing Association of Nigeria has said there are better places. No other person is better placed to say that. The current government policy is asphyxiating, is destroying industry, destroying manufacturing. And that, of course, is what we do when we refer to production. The truth of the matter is productivity. Now, you see what's going on. You remove fuel subsidy. There was huge revenue for government. Huge revenue. States who were receiving 5 billion received up to 10 billion now. What is this excess revenue doing? You should have been used to unlock rural communities, create access road, support farmers. What do we see? If you remember, a very respectable newspaper, Business Day, reported sometime the corollary between when federal allocation is shared and the spike in the demand for dollars.
Right.
Who does the demand? Meanwhile, middle-scale business people cannot access the foreign exchange. They cannot.
Who do you
so
think
who does the demand of these dollars?
People in government?
Because, of course, because the excess from the excess revenue accruing from oil subsidy, from this removal of subsidy, would have been reinvested in rural infrastructure. If you revitalize rural infrastructure, people can produce and then take through the roads right to the market.
Very quickly,
you expand production.
Do you think state governors or state governments can actually comfortably pay this 70,000?
Well, you see, the question of paying, in most cases, you see, let's be very honest, let's be very factual. This money can be paid much more.
Right.
What we are saying is, cut the big, you see, the truth is, you must term the nature of political power here, because that is the question. You see some local government in River State, I understand, somebody employed, say he had 300 PAs. Obviously he has to find money to give them. And these people just hang around the local government secretariat. So you see, the truth of the matter is the political will to rearrange the political structure and refocus it to productivity is the critical game changer. But the question is, who takes the initiative? Because the sense of entitlement, what drives Nigerian political process is sense of entitlement and privilege. You have had 2 cars. As soon as you get into government, the next thing is car, another. Those who built 20 billion naira house for the vice president, was he living on the street before?
Good question.
Was he living on the street?
I guess that's a good place to leave it tonight. Practicability of the new minimum wage and, of course, the inclusion of domestic workers. You say 70,000 naira.
It's not workable
it's
for
a
us.
non-starter.
It's currently not workable
completely. Lynda Ogbonna, CEO, coralworker.com. Thank you very much for joining us on Newsnight. And Charles Onunaiju, journalist, scholar, and director, Center for China Studies. Okay, I would have spoken some Chinese with you.
Oh, thank you.
Not that I do.